Imagine this. You're standing under a clear night sky, stars twinkling above, when suddenly a bright streak tears across the heavens. It looks beautiful. But what if I told you that this glowing line might not be a shooting star at all? It might be a piece of trash. Not the kind you throw away in your kitchen, but space trash, fast, dangerous, and increasing in number every single day. The peaceful night sky we admire is turning into a chaotic junkyard. And unlike litter on Earth, we can't just send a cleanup crew. The real threat of space junk isn't science fiction anymore. It's a growing crisis that could affect satellites, astronauts, and even us here on Earth. So buckle up, because we're diving deep into the terrifying truth behind the mess humanity has made in orbit. Every time we launch something into space, whether it's a satellite, a rocket, or a space probe, we leave a trace. And often that trace stays behind. Decades of space missions have left a debris field swirling above our heads. Thousands of old, inactive satellites, spent rocket stages, fragments from past collisions, and even tiny paint flecks are now part of Earth's orbital environment. And here's the terrifying part. These objects travel at blistering speeds. We're talking about 17,000 miles per hour. At that velocity, even something as small as a bolt could destroy a functioning satellite or tear through the hull of a spacecraft. Right now, it's estimated that there are over 34,000 pieces of space debris larger than 10 centimeters, around 900,000 pieces between 1 and 10 centimeters, and more than 128 million pieces smaller than 1 centimeter. And these numbers? They're growing. Every new satellite launch adds to the clutter. With the rise of private space companies and ambitious satellite constellations like Starlink, the skies are getting more crowded than ever. Let's take a moment to understand why this matters. Satellites are essential to our modern lives. They help us with communication, GPS navigation, weather forecasting, Earth observation, and even financial transactions. Without satellites, much of our world would grind to a halt. But satellites are vulnerable. A single collision can destroy one entirely, turning it into thousands of new debris pieces in an instant. This phenomenon, known as the Kessler syndrome, is a chain reaction where one collision causes debris that triggers more collisions, potentially rendering certain orbits completely unusable. And we've already seen glimpses of this danger. In 2007, China conducted an anti-satellite missile test, deliberately destroying one of its weather satellites. The result? Over 3,000 new pieces of debris. Just 2 years later, in 2009, an American Iridium communications satellite accidentally collided with a defunct Russian satellite. That incident produced another 2,000 pieces. These were not hypothetical warnings. They were real collisions with real consequences. The International Space Station, orbiting roughly 400 kilometers above Earth, faces the risk of space debris daily. Even a paint chip traveling at orbital speeds can crack a window or puncture sensitive instruments. Astronauts have had to perform emergency maneuvers, called debris avoidance maneuvers, over 30 times in recent years. Each maneuver burns precious fuel and disrupts planned operations. Now imagine what would happen if a larger piece struck the ISS. The results could be catastrophic. Even Earth itself isn't entirely safe. While most space junk burns up upon re-entry into the atmosphere, larger objects like defunct satellites and spent rocket parts can survive the journey and crash into the surface. In 2020, a large Chinese rocket stage fell uncontrolled back to Earth, with debris scattering across villages in the Ivory Coast. Luckily, no one was hurt. But as launches increase, so does the risk. And here's the catch. Space junk doesn't just stay up there and disappear. In low Earth orbit, drag from the upper atmosphere eventually brings objects down. But that can take years or decades. In higher orbits, some debris can remain for centuries. Without active cleanup or better planning, we're essentially trapping ourselves in a cloud of our own garbage. The race for space dominance adds another layer of tension. As countries compete to deploy more satellites, the urgency to secure orbital real estate has led to more crowding and sometimes reckless behavior. The geopolitical implications are just as dangerous as the physical ones. If one nation's satellite is damaged, accusations fly. Was it sabotage? Was it debris? Was it negligence? The more cluttered our skies become, the more complicated these questions will get. Meanwhile, private companies are pushing the boundaries of what's possible. SpaceX, Amazon, OneWeb, they all plan to launch thousands of satellites for global internet coverage. But each satellite is a potential hazard if not managed properly. Even when companies follow regulations, accidents happen. A single failed deorbit can leave a satellite circling Earth for decades, contributing to the ever-growing problem. So what are we doing about it? Well, a few promising ideas are being developed. One solution is to build satellites with self-deorbiting capabilities, essentially giving them the ability to remove themselves from orbit once their mission ends. Some designs use inflatable structures to increase drag, helping the satellite fall into the atmosphere faster. Others use propulsion systems to guide the satellite into a controlled re-entry. Then there are efforts to clean up existing debris. Japan's space agency JAXA has tested an electromagnetic tether that could drag space junk into the atmosphere. The European Space Agency is working on a mission called ClearSpace 1, which will attempt to grab debris using robotic arms. These technologies are groundbreaking, but they're still in early stages. And cleanup missions are expensive and complex. Beyond technology, there's also the legal and regulatory challenge. Who owns space junk? Who is responsible for cleaning it up? International treaties like the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 don't have specific guidelines for debris. That means cooperation is critical. Space isn't just America's problem or Russia's or China's. It belongs to all of us. And cleaning it up is going to take all of us working together. Education and awareness are also vital. Most people don't realize how serious the problem is. Out of sight, out of mind. But the consequences of ignoring space debris are very real. We need to shift our mindset. Just like we've started caring about plastic in the ocean, we need to care about junk in space. And if you're thinking this all sounds like something far away that doesn't impact your daily life, think again. A damaged satellite could knock out internet coverage, disrupt GPS signals, interfere with weather forecasting, or even affect banking systems. The longer we wait to act, the higher the stakes become. This isn't just about protecting billion-dollar equipment. It's about preserving access to space for future generations. Right now we stand at a crossroads. We can either ignore the problem and hope for the best, or we can face it head-on, using innovation, cooperation, and responsibility to clean up the sky before it's too late. In Part 2 we'll explore what happens if we fail, the nightmare scenarios of runaway debris collisions, satellite loss, spaceflight shutdowns, and the potential militarization of orbital space. We'll also look at the most ambitious and promising technologies being developed to combat this crisis. The question is no longer whether space junk is a threat, it's whether we're willing to do something about it before the junk starts falling back on us. Alright, let's assume the unthinkable has just happened. After months in deep space, through radiation belts, micrometeorite threats, and psychological pressure, the SpaceX Starship actually touches down on the Martian surface. In one go. No refueling depots, no intermediate stops, just a direct shot from Earth to Mars. The red dust swirls around the landing legs as the engines shut down. A new chapter for humanity begins. But as the engines cool and the silence of Mars takes over, a bigger question looms. What now? The first few minutes after landing are mission critical. Remember, Mars isn't forgiving. Its gravity is about 1/3 that of Earth, and the atmosphere is incredibly thin, less than 1% the density of Earth's atmosphere. That means thermal management, airlock integrity, and landing gear reliability are all under intense stress. A small miscalculation in the landing sequence could lead to a hard impact, and once you're down, there's no quick fix or return flight. So SpaceX would have to ensure the Starship isn't just a rocket, it's a fully operational habitat, ready to support life immediately. Initial steps would likely involve a complete systems check. Crew members would begin by running diagnostics on oxygen, power, communication, and thermal control systems. If any one of these fails, the mission is compromised. Imagine traveling 54 million kilometers just to find out the heater isn't working. A basic atmospheric circulation system must engage instantly to regulate temperatures and distribute breathable air. Martian surface temperatures can swing from -20 to -100 degrees Celsius within hours, and electronics are not a fan of that. Neither are humans. So let's talk life support. The Starship must carry its own oxygen regeneration system. NASA and SpaceX are both exploring technologies like MOXIE, the Mars Oxygen In Situ Resource Utilization Experiment. It extracts oxygen from Mars' CO2-heavy atmosphere through electrolysis. While the prototype on board the Perseverance rover was just the size of a toaster, scaling this tech up for 20 humans is a monumental challenge. It would need to generate enough oxygen for breathing, backup reserves, and possibly for future fuel synthesis. And then there's water. We can't overstate how critical water is. Not just for drinking but also for hygiene, food preparation, and electrolysis-based fuel production. One option is to bring a full supply from Earth, but that adds enormous weight. More likely, SpaceX will rely on a combination of recycled water from the crew and in situ resource utilization. That means finding and mining Martian ice. Yes, water ice does exist under the surface, particularly at mid and high latitudes. But reaching and extracting it? That's a different beast altogether. They'd need drills, filtration systems, and a lot of power, which brings us to the next point. Power generation on Mars is not just about solar panels. Sure, SpaceX will install high-efficiency solar arrays as soon as they land, but Martian dust storms can last weeks, even months. During that time, solar efficiency drops dramatically. So redundancy is key. NASA has been working on small nuclear fission reactors like the Kilopower project, which can provide consistent energy regardless of weather conditions. If SpaceX hopes to maintain reliable power, some kind of compact, low-maintenance nuclear system may be essential. Now let's get into crew logistics. After months in zero gravity, astronauts won't just jump out of the Starship like a scene from a sci-fi film. Their muscles will have atrophied, bones weakened, and sense of balance severely disrupted. Even Martian gravity, though weaker than Earth's, will feel overwhelming. Initial excursions outside the ship will likely be limited to brief, carefully planned EVAs. These early surface operations would include soil sampling, sensor deployment, and habitat perimeter inspections. And speaking of the habitat, let's not assume Starship is the final living space. While it can act as a temporary habitat, it's not optimized for long-term Martian living. The interior will be cramped, with limited privacy, shared facilities, and an environment more akin to a submarine than a home. SpaceX will need to deploy inflatable habitats or construct semi-permanent modules using Martian regolith as building material. NASA has been testing 3D printing techniques using simulated regolith, and if viable, this could be a game changer. But how would we even get that construction started? Automation. Robots will be the frontline workers in the first phase of Martian colonization. Drones, rovers, and automated printers will likely be sent ahead or alongside the crew. Their mission: scout the area, build basic infrastructure, lay out power lines, set up solar panels, and maybe even start mining ice. These machines won't just support the crew, they'll ensure survival. Now let's talk communication. Mars is not close. Depending on orbital positions, the delay in sending a message from Mars to Earth can be anywhere from 4 to 24 minutes. That means real-time communication is impossible. There is no calling Houston for help during an emergency. So, AI systems on board need to be robust, capable of diagnosing problems, offering solutions, and even executing commands independently. Autonomous software isn't just a luxury, it's a lifeline. Food, obviously, is another issue. In the short term, the crew will survive on prepackaged meals, freeze-dried, vacuum-sealed, and meticulously calorie-counted. But for any mission extending beyond a few months, Martian agriculture becomes a must. NASA has been experimenting with growing crops in simulated Martian soil. While the soil is toxic in its raw form due to perchlorates, it can be treated and mixed with organic material. Hydroponics and aeroponics also offer promising avenues. Imagine a small greenhouse inside a Starship module, a splash of green in a sea of red. Psychological well-being is perhaps the most underestimated challenge. Mars is a lonely place. There's no blue sky, no ocean waves, no birdsong. Just dust, rocks, and silence. Isolation and confinement can break even the strongest minds. That's why social dynamics, personal space, and recreation facilities are absolutely essential. The Starship would need VR systems, books, music, even artificial windows displaying Earth scenes to maintain mental health. And let's not forget regular contact with family back home, even if it's delayed. Security is another consideration. We're talking about surviving in an environment that is constantly trying to kill you. The Starship will need radiation shielding, micrometeorite armor, and backup systems for every essential process. Even a tiny air leak or computer glitch could become fatal. Redundancy will be the backbone of Martian safety. Double oxygen tanks, double water purifiers, double everything. Because on Mars, there's no margin for error. Assuming all of this is in place, the mission transitions from survival to science. Mars isn't just a destination, it's a treasure chest of knowledge. Geologists would look for ancient riverbeds and lake deposits to study the planet's watery past. Biologists would search for microbial life beneath the surface. Engineers would test how Mars affects materials, machines, and human physiology over long durations. Every minute on Mars could yield data that transforms our understanding of the solar system. And then comes the question, do we stay or do we return? Elon Musk's long-term vision involves permanent colonization. That means developing a sustainable fuel production method on Mars itself. The plan is to use the Sabatier reaction, a chemical process that combines carbon dioxide from the Martian atmosphere with hydrogen from water to produce methane and oxygen. These are the exact components needed for Starship's Raptor engines. If this works at scale, it means the return journey is possible without carrying return fuel from Earth. That changes everything. Let's imagine for a moment this all works out. The water is harvested, oxygen generated, methane synthesized, solar power stable, food is growing, and the crew is thriving. Then comes the real test, scaling up. One Starship can carry 20 to 100 people depending on how comfortable or cruel you want to be. But if we're talking about a self-sufficient Martian base or even a colony, we need dozens, maybe hundreds of Starships making the trip. Each one will bring equipment, habitats, specialists, and new technologies. And yes, the cost is enormous. Launching one Starship may eventually drop below $10 million according to Musk, but outfitting it for a Mars mission adds hundreds of millions more. Multiply that by the number of ships needed and we're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar endeavor. But what's the alternative? Stay confined to Earth, hoping no asteroid climate collapse, or global war resets our civilization. Colonizing Mars is the ultimate backup plan. Not just for one nation but for humanity itself. So, could SpaceX land on Mars in one go? Technically yes. But that's just the start. The real challenge begins after touchdown. Sustaining life, producing fuel, managing psychological health, and building infrastructure are all far more complex than just the trip itself. Starship is the vehicle, but the mission is human endurance, innovation, and willpower. Mars isn't going to welcome us with open arms, we have to earn our place there. And in the end, even if we only send a small crew at first, each footprint in the Martian dust is a giant leap for everyone still watching back on Earth. This isn't science fiction anymore.